Welcome to Fluent and Chill, your best place for NBA news, opinions, and updates. This week, as always, I'm here, anthonyk of Sports Fluent, and I'm here with my man, Jermaine J. Dub from Chilltown Hoops. Jermaine, how you doing, man?
What's up, brother? What's going on?
NBA edition, and we're going to go back. I told someone that I was born in the 70s, and their response was, "Oh, I kind of like that music from back then." I immediately wanted to strangle them. But afterward, I said, hey, this week on Fluent and Chill, we're talking about the 70s. And there's some really good players. And I thought we would take a different approach than we did with the 50s and 60s. Because inevitably, when we had those conversations, we started talking about the all-decade team.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, let's just start with the all-decade team. We'll go through first team and second team.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the omissions? And then what are your thoughts on some of these guys? So we're going to start with right with the guards. We'll go through. The first one on the list for all decades, 70s NBA team, Walt Frazier.
I'm good with Walt Frazier being on the all-decade team, first team. Absolutely.
First team, Walt Frazier, all-NBA 6 times, all-defensive team 6 times, 7-time All-Star, obviously for the Knicks, 2 titles in 70 and 73. Yet, when I put out my list of top point guards of all time and had him on that list, do you know that half of the people, 1, didn't even know who he was, 2 told me he shouldn't be on your list?
Well, I'm pretty sure that a lot of those people, Tone, think that the NBA started in 2001. That's probably why. So they don't have any idea of who Walt Frazier actually is. My uncle introduced me to Walt Frazier when I was like 5, 6 years old. He was wearing number 10. That's his guy. He loved Walt Frazier. So Walt Frazier is a big deal. He was a big deal in my house. No question about it.
It's funny. The first line, and this is on NBA.com, the first line is maybe the coolest player in NBA history.
Oh, man. Well, maybe Doc, Jordan, but when you talk about a dude that was just straight class and stayed clean, it doesn't get any better than Walt Frazier. Absolutely. And on top of that, he was a baller. Like it wasn't just a show.
I was about to compare him. This is going to upset a lot of people in New York, but I don't care. He was like Joe Namath, but with skill.
Actually, he could actually play. No question.
He could actually play. Like, I know we're not talking football, but I think Joe Namath, 1, shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. 2, I think was completely overrated. But that's a conversation for another day. Next is Hondo, John Havlicek, one of the forgotten Celtics. And yet, when you look at Celtics numbers, he's always up there at the top of most of the lists in terms of statistics. Hondo was an all-star every year he played. Made the NBA first team 4 straight years, 70 through 74. NBA second team 3 times in the 70s and 70, 75, and 76. He's got all the accolades. He was a finals MVP. Wait, was he twice? Finals MVP, again in 74 and 76.
And remember, too, Tone, the year he made the all-league team in 76, he retired the next season. So he was on his way out, still making the all-league team. So Havlicek was awesome, which goes back to what I talked about with Russell in the 60s. Russell got Havlicek's best years. It wasn't like Havlicek was on the other side of his career. Russell got him in 62. So it's basically, I'm trying to think of a guy, if you can think of a guy today, not Kevin Durant good, or maybe even Carmelo Anthony good. So if you can imagine, I don't know, Rudy Gobert getting Carmelo Anthony as a rookie.
In his absolute best, yeah.
Right, and having him his entire career. So, and having him his entire career, imagine how good he would have actually been. So Havlicek was awesome, no question. But he's actually, I got him in the top 20 all time for me.
The next one might be, if he's not your number 1, he's probably in your top 3 of most underrated all-time greats because part of his career was spent in the ABA. But if Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is considered the best player of the 70s, this guy's probably the biggest star of the 70s. And to be honest, I only started looking into him when Michael Jordan said, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be what I am today. And that's Dr. J.
Well, when you talk about a guy who saved the league, 2 leagues as a matter of fact, because, I mean, the ABA, Doc was the entire league. Everybody came to see Doc. And whoever you were playing, who Doc was to the ABA was who Bird and Magic were to the NBA in the 80s. Everybody came to see Doc. No matter who, Artis Gilmore, no matter David Thompson, any of these other guys who were playing, everybody came to see Doc. And they knew that they were going to get a show. This guy revolutionized the game. And to prove his greatness, it actually translated into the NBA, which everybody said, this is where all the talent is. And he went to the NBA and did the same thing that he was doing in the ABA. The downside is that the ABA got 5-6 years of Doc's career, as opposed to the NBA getting 10 years of his career. And remember, Doc retired from the NBA with 31,000 points. He only played 11 seasons in the NBA.
Yeah, and it was one of the things, because when we used to talk about statistics, they didn't used to include the ABA and NBA numbers. So Doc wasn't on any of those lists, so people didn't know him, unless you watch the game. Like, I'm talking about the younger generation would say, who's that? And, we always see that one highlight of him kind of coming from behind the backboard and around to the other side. Yeah. We see that all the time. But like before Magic, before Bird, before Jordan, it was Doc, right? He was the guy.
That was correct.
And when I learned about it, and when they started then to add the ABA numbers, which they should, professional league is, the talent was a little bit mixed. Wow. Like when you watch him play, you think there's a guy, like he had the athleticism, he had style, he had just the guy you wanted to. There's very few people that professional athletes would pay money to watch. And I always say, if a professional athlete will pay money to watch another professional athlete play, that's somebody worth watching. And that 100% was Dr. J.
Absolutely.
I know you're high on the next one because you bring up his name very often. Most people don't know who he is. Elvin Hayes is the second forward on the all 70s team.
Well, Elvin Hayes was a guy who he moved. He played the 5 in college, and then he moved to the 4. He played the 5 when he first came into the NBA, and then he moved to the 4 because he played for the Bullets, and they had gotten Wes Unseld, so he ended up moving to the 4, which is interesting because Unseld was smaller than Elvin Hayes, but they moved Unseld to the 5 and had Elvin Hayes playing the 4. And it was interchangeable, but Elvin Hayes was a glass cleaner. He was buckets. He was left-handed. He was tough as nails. He could score on anybody. I actually thought that he should have won the Finals MVP in '78.
I was about to bring that up. He led the Bullets. He led the Bullets to 3 NBA Finals in 5 years. They won the championship in '78. Unseld, like you were saying, was the MVP. But let me tell you what Hayes' numbers were. 20.7 points, 11.9 rebounds, and 2 blocks a game. I don't know what Unseld did. I don't know.
Wait. I was just getting ready to say, Tone, don't stop there. Keep going, because Unseld, he went 9 and 15. Now, if that's going on today, where we got a guy in the NBA Finals going 21, 12, and 2 blocks, and I don't know, Andre Drummond wins the NBA Finals MVP because he goes 11 and 18. What's going to happen?
Everyone's going to say that Curry should have won that Finals MVP, not Andre Iguodala. That's what's going to happen, right? He got robbed of a Finals MVP.
No question about it, man. No question about it. He was the one. He was actually, when you think about a guy like Elvin Hayes, he was instrumental in revolutionizing the big man. With Jabbar, with Wes Unseld, with Artis Gilmore. He was instrumental. And on top of that, being left-handed, because, the left-handed big man he was not a dinosaur, but he wasn't something that was common. Bruce Lee was left-handed.
Still not common.
Right. Still not common. But as a left-handed big man, he caused a lot of problems for a lot of guys. And don't forget that he was also part of that Houston team that beat UCLA.
Right. So, I did forget that.
Yes,
forget
sir.
that. So the next
Jabbar
one,
a lot of trouble.
Well, speaking of Jabbar, obviously the center for the all-decade team in the 70s is the captain. It's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. We could probably do a whole 3-hour show only talking about everything that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar did, and yet people still underrate how good he was. He literally was a phenomenal offensive player with a shot you couldn't stop for 2 decades in the league. Plus, he could play defense. Plus, listen, when we talk, you and I have had a GOAT debate before.
Yes, we have.
And we have a variation. But if I were to say, forget the NBA, I'm talking high school, college, NBA.
It's not close.
I don't believe there's even an argument.
It's not close.
It's Kareem. He's literally won everything everywhere and has been the best player on those teams. I mean, from the time he was like 13. Right?
It's not close, Tony.
I'm not going to get an argument there, right? I don't think I'm going to get one.
It's not close. Tell me about absolutely not close. And what I'll tell you is I've actually got into debates about this. You know, Jabbar played in the weakest center or in the weakest era of the NBA in the 70s, which would explain why he dominated. So if I'm playing in an era that's weak, what difference does it make? Even if I was playing in an era that was tough, I probably wouldn't dominate enough. I can appreciate that. But if I played in an era that was quote unquote weak, you would think that I would dominate. Well, he did. Won the league MVP 5 times in the 70s. From 69 to 77, that's 8 seasons. Jabbar went 30-15. Chamberlain is the only guy who can say he's done that for a longer period of time. No other player can say that they've done that. 30-15 for a longer period than Jabbar. He had one move, Tone. Stop this and you stop me. He played 20 years.
And still no. I think there was something I read where the skyhook had only been blocked twice. Think about how many times he took that shot or made that shot in 20 years. He's the leading scorer in all time in the history of the NBA, and it only got blocked twice.
Are you kidding me, Tone? That's it. This dude played 20 years.
Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but listen, it's out there. It's out there that it only got blocked twice. Of course. I don't. How can you block that? I've tried to block it, especially a guy that size with those long arms. He
can't get to it.
He perfected it.
Get to it.
He says a joke. He says, somebody asked me, can you teach me how to skyhook? He goes, you got 10 years? Because he goes, that's how long it took me.
That we could just go over and
he said that's how long. That's how long it took me because they banned dunking, right, in college to stop him. So he said I had to learn something else, and so I learned the skyhook, something that no one could stop.
Absolutely.
And like I said, we could go on and on about Jabbar, but there was one interesting thing that you said about the weak era, and things like this drive me nuts.
Me too.
Because one. I've said this to you yesterday. You play who's in front of you. That's it. That's all you can do is play who's in front of you. On top of that, how can you win then? So if you win and the era is weak, the era is weak. That's why you won. That's why you're expected to win and you win. So they're like, yeah, you were expected to win.
Correct.
But if you're not expected to win and then you lose, well, then you also lose. Like it's literally you're in a no-win situation. Oh, you're expected to win, so it doesn't count.
Right.
Oh, you were good enough to win and you didn't. So so what do you have to? You have to be expected to lose and win? How many people do that on a regular basis?
It's a lose-lose situation. Very much like Chamberlain. Yeah. Well, you're the biggest guy out here, so you should dominate. And if you're not dominating, well, why aren't you dominating?
Why aren't you dominating?
Guy out here. You're the biggest guy out here. Well, I mean, Jabbar did take the Milwaukee Bucks to the NBA championship, I think twice in 3 years, and won the NBA finals. And those Laker teams, they were a guy away. But you and I had this discussion, Tone, that in the 70s, it was a different champion almost every year. There wasn't a team that was dominant in the 70s. You had the Warriors, you had the Knicks, you had the Celtics, you had the Bucks, you had the Bullets, you had Seattle. I don't think that we've had that in our lifetime. I'm talking recently, where you had 6 or 7 different teams win the NBA championship in a decade.
No, it's been the last few decades have kind of been ruled by, I don't like to call them dynasties. I know people throw that word out. I think we, like with most words, that guy's a warrior. That team's a dynasty. He's elite. I think those words, unfortunately, their meaning has been a little bit tarnished. However, you're right. We haven't had that parity, right? It's one of the things, if you look at other sports, it's, it's what makes some other sports really exciting. Like there was a stretch there. Well, let's go to the 90s. Sorry, 80s. 80s, you was pretty much it was the Lakers or the Celtics. You had a sprinkling of the Sixers, but it was the Lakers Celtics. Mm-hmm. In the 90s, obviously it was the Bulls with like a little rocket interlude in the middle. Mm-hmm. And then there was kind of this Laker, that early 2000s, but it was kind of open. The Pistons got. And then it became this, and I honestly, this probably was no fun for a fan of any other team, but it became kind of the Warriors versus, LeBron. Mm-hmm. And I'll say LeBron because it was him on the Cavs or him on the Heat. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Look, that might be fun if you're a LeBron fan or if you're, Curry or a Warriors fan. Man, it's not good for the league, though. And that's why when you say the 70s, if someone says it was the weakest, you know what? I think it had the most parity. And I think that's actually what makes good sport is that I look to the NFL. Now I get it. The Patriots are kind of the exception because they were so good for 20 years. But even then, you look at it, and in that 20-year stretch, you had the Giants win, the Eagles win, the Saints won, Baltimore. Yeah, you had so many, and that's what I love about the NFL is that every year your team, of the 32 teams, there's at least half that have a legit shot if everything goes right, injuries, whatever, that have a legit shot at winning. Right. And I think that's better. Like if we went into every NBA season like we did, I want to say, unfortunately, it was the bubble year. So it was a little bad. But if you looked at that, every team had 2 stars, right? Because Kawhi didn't go to the Lakers. Kawhi went to the Clippers. Right. So you had the Lakers with LeBron and AD. Mm-hmm. You had the Clippers with Paul George and Kawhi. Mm-hmm. You had now, unfortunately the Warriors weren't healthy, but had they been healthy, it would have been back to Curry, Clay, Draymond. Had they been healthy, you had the Rockets. I believe it was Paul. That was the year Paul and Harden, right? There was all these. The Bucks were Middleton and Giannis. Mm-hmm. You had I'm forgetting a team. Oh, the Sixers were. Before we knew what Ben Simmons was, Ben Simmons and Embiid. And I'm sure I'm missing a bunch, guys, but there was a bunch of teams that had 2 stars, and you really were like, I don't know who's going to win this year. Right. Now, things worked out differently because of COVID and whatever, but I think that was really exciting. Whereas now, I know that the Bucks, obviously defending champs, have a chance, but really, what are we talking about? We're talking Lakers and Nets because they're so flooded with talent. So I don't want to knock the 70s for that parity, right?
I think it's a great thing, Tony. I mean, you're talking about in the 70s, you had 7 different teams in that decade win the NBA championship. And that hasn't happened in my lifetime. And I don't think that I'm going to see that again, strictly because how guys move around as much as they do. And not only how they move around as much as they do, the places that they go. I mean, are we going to see the Trailblazers win the NBA championship in our lifetime? I mean, are we going to see New Orleans win the NBA championship? I doubt that very seriously, that we're going to see Oklahoma City win the NBA championship strictly because Oklahoma City has to build it through the draft, right? Sacramento, Minnesota, these teams have to build it through the draft. And these teams, ultimately, they get rated by New York. They get rated by Los Angeles. So they don't have their talent for very long. New Orleans ends up losing all of their guys, as opposed to in the 70s where these teams were built through the draft. And there was parity, and it also helped that the ABA collapsed. So when the ABA collapsed, now the players from the ABA, who everybody thought was good enough to play in the NBA anyway, the NBA absorbed those guys, not just the players, the teams as well. So now the level of competition went up. Add that to the fact that the teams got better. So you do have parity there. I thought that was great. I mean, like I said, Tony, you're talking 7 teams in a 9-year decade, in a 9-year span. That was awesome.
Look at all the players. You speak about New Orleans. Look at all the players they got from LA for Anthony Davis. They've all turned into actually pretty good players. Mm-hmm. But how many of them are still on New Orleans?
Let's see.
Ball is gone.
Gone.
Randall's gone.
Randall is gone.
And there's Ingram.
Ingram is still there.
Ingram's still there.
Josh Hart is still there. He just signed an extension.
So of the 4, I guess, big ones, half of them are gone, to your point, right? Keep those 4 together, add in Zion.
We might have something going on.
Might have something there. All right, so I'm going to read out the second team because I want to go through second and third team a little faster. You just tell me which one probably is the most underrated of the second team. So the team is Pete Maravich, JoJo White, who I'll be honest, I am not familiar with JoJo White. Rick Barry, Bob McAdoo, and Artis Gilmore.
Bob McAdoo, it might be the most underrated. Tony, you know that Bob McAdoo is the only player to I think he led the league in scoring and did not make first team All NBA.
The league MVP in 75, the NBA scoring champion 3 times in the decade, and never made first team.
Can you believe that? That's nuts.
Not only because you told me is the only reason I believe it. Because again, when we compare it to today, could you imagine a scoring champ 3 times, never, and an MVP, never not making?
So Kevin Durant never made first team All NBA.
Yeah, there people be screaming from the roof.
It'd be a riot.
Yeah. All right. So Balbakadu. All right. So let's see. So third team, and then we'll move on to today. But we'll finish it off. My guy, I think this guy doesn't get enough respect, even though he's the logo. I think that's all we know. Jerry West, Tiny Archibald, Bob Lanier, Wes Unseld, Dave Cowens. They put two centers. They had to squeeze in 2 centers and only 1 forward on the third team. Is there one that you think?
I think Dave Cowens, in my opinion, might be the most underrated. Like, people don't talk. First of all, I think Dave was a 4-man instead of a 5. I think he'd be a 4-man today instead of a 5. And for the Celtics to win the NBA championship in not back to back, twice in 3 years, he was a big deal for them. Dave Cowens was definitely a bigger deal than people give him credit for. No question.
I will say this because they say it. Apologies to Bill Walton, Dan Issel, David Thompson, Wilt Chamberlain, Spencer Haywood, Lou Hudson, Bob Dandridge, Gail Goodrich, Calvin Murphy, Paul Silas. That's a name that we don't talk about enough. And the Iceman, George Gervin.
Well, Jerry West played in the 60s. Chamberlain, his best seasons were in the 60s. Right. So those guys are out. Bob Dandridge was awesome also. No question about that. And JoJo White. Really good players.
So I would recommend to any of those that heard a name, just think about this. That was the 15, and if I give the apologies, probably the top 20 players of the 70s. If there was a name there you didn't recognize, I challenge you to go look them up, watch them play, and then tell me the 70s was a weak, terrible era, because I think you're oversimplifying the parity that was in that decade. We did the Atlantic Division. We're fast forwarding. We're back in our time machine. We're into 2021 or 2022, really, when we get to the end of this. But Atlantic, Central, we've talked about. The Southeast, we're going to start at the bottom. The Orlando Magic, still going to be at the bottom of that division?
Yes, Tone, they're absolutely still going to be at the bottom of that division. I look at what they've done in the draft, and I'm very disappointed in Mo Bamba. I thought that he was going to be a lot better than what he is. I think that he could be a great rim protector and a defender, but he wants to stand out on the three-point line and shoot threes. He wants to play on the perimeter, and that's because that is what is sexy, and that's what looks good today. But it doesn't translate into wins, particularly for that team right there. It just doesn't do it. Now, when they get back Marquise Fultz, that's what I'm talking about. When they get him back this season, he'll be better. He blew his knee up last year, and he was actually on his way. He was getting better before he hurt his knee. He's going to be better. I think Anthony is going to improve. But losing Vooch, that was big for them. And they're clearly starting over. I think Jalen Suggs is going to help them out tremendously. I think he starts day one, and they do have a good building block with him. I'd like to see some improvement from Mo Bamba. He's the difference for me, because going into the draft, he was one of the better athletes. So for him to not be as productive,
not utilize those talents, right?
Yeah, he should be a lot more. And the fact that Vooch is gone, I should see him more in the lineup, and I'd like to see a jump from him.
Yeah, you actually answered my question, because I was asking about Jalen Suggs. That's kind of their big off-season move, is drafting Suggs. Kind of fell to them a little bit. Most people expected the Raptors to take him, but
very surprised your boys passed on him, Tone. Very surprised your boys passed on him.
They saw something. I don't know what it is yet, but they saw something in Scotty Barnes, and I've said this to you before. He has embraced Toronto like no other athlete I have seen come here, so that might be part of it.
Yeah.
Jalen Suggs. So I want to ask you a question about that. So Jalen Suggs, after they passed on him, came out and said, and I thought this was really immature, just be honest, and that it gives me question marks about him, because even if he did it, that's really immature. 2, to come out and say it, I think made it worse. So he said, I purposely blew the interview with Toronto because I didn't want to go there.
Now,
And that gives, and listen, I get it. That's might be how you feel, right? Toronto, for all intents and purposes, if you don't know, it's a different country, right? You don't know that if you come here, you couldn't tell the difference. But that being said, to say that, I think just shows. Now, I get it. He's young. He's just coming. But I think, his people need to be like, hey, you're a professional. Like, that's not a smart thing. Don't say that. Because it can be taken the wrong way.
Yeah, and I think that's just a guy being young. Guy being young and just being immature, because we've had that in the past, Tone. I mean, Isaiah Thomas said it when he was interviewed by the Detroit Pistons. When he was coming out, he said, I purposely answered every question wrong so they could pass on me because I wanted to go to the Bulls in 1981. He did not want to play for the Pistons. He made that clear. But we're talking about a 19-year-old kid who 3 years ago, was in high school in Chicago. So, I mean, to get the chance to play for the Bulls, what do I have to do? Do I have to screw this interview up? Because I'll do it. So.
Yeah, listen, I'm not saying I'm okay with them doing it. I get that they do it. I'm just not. I don't like. Listen, I can go back as far as you want. In any sport, I didn't like Eric Lindros saying he didn't want to play for the Quebec Nordique. I didn't like John Elway saying he didn't want to play. I didn't like Eli Manning saying he didn't want to. Like, I don't like any of that being said publicly.
What's your problem with that, Tone? Honestly, what's your problem with it?
My problem with it is you are 1% of 1% who are fortunate enough to be in the NBA one of 450 players.
Okay.
Out of the millions and millions who are playing, basketball worldwide, of the hundreds of thousands that are playing. And it's, listen, if you have a preference for a team, I get it. Like, my favorite team is this. But to purposely come out and say, I don't want to go to that city, because listen, is it about, they didn't say the team. They didn't say the team, I don't like the coach, I don't like the play style, I don't like they basically called out a city and said, I don't want to go to that city. And I just think that's a bad look publicly to say. I get it. I don't want to live in Detroit. Cool. I don't go around telling people I don't want to live in Detroit because it's a horrible city. One, because I don't believe that to be true. But two, I don't like that, the publicity of it.
Right.
Maybe I'm old school.
Even though it's going on every day. So your logic is, even though it's going on every day, because right now while I'm talking to you, there's somebody that is not interested in moving to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I don't want to live there. Now, I'm not going to say that to everybody that I know, but I'm not going to say that I want to live there. I'm not going to say I want to live there publicly, but I don't want to live there. Now, with that being said, Tone, we have people every day who have jobs that they don't want to move to different cities. I don't want to live in Toronto. I don't want to live in Boston. Now, to say that publicly, I can appreciate your logic on that. However, the feeling of it, the feeling of not wanting to do that, that's completely different. I think I know where you're going with that, but I think we might be a little bit at odds.
Like I said, I understand not wanting to go up somewhere. But in most cases, the people that say that, one, have never been to the city. They don't know what they're like. If they're to pick on a city, like to say, hey, I don't want to go here. Let's use an example. Carmelo Anthony is set to be the second pick in the league. And they're saying, hey, are you excited to possibly go to Detroit? And him to say, you know what? I don't really know Detroit as a city, even though he should. But let's say, I don't know really Detroit as a city, but I do know that Larry Brown is pretty hard on his rookies. So I'm concerned with how that's going to work out. I'd actually respect that more because it's based on some fact and knowledge versus I don't want to go to Detroit. I heard it's very, it's a pretty rough city. No, like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. So, all right. So that's a lot on the Magic, who, let's be honest, once they get good, their players are going to leave anyways, which has been the MO of the Magic, which is unfortunate because you would think people like Florida. You like Florida? There's no state tax. The weather's beautiful except during the hurricanes. There's so much to do. You're close to everything. I shouldn't even say this, but I'm actually talking about maybe making a move myself to Florida. Every time the snow starts to fall, I start thinking maybe I should move back to the south.
What's the problem, Tone? That 15 degrees getting kind of corny?
It's that's a conversation for another day. I've never liked the cold. I've never liked the snow. I've not. When I got a job offer, you don't know this. When I got a job offer, someone said, hey, we want to move you to Scottsdale, Arizona. Before the phone call ended, they said, "So what do you think?" I said, "My bags are packed. When do you want me to leave?"
I'm already done.
I'm ready to go. When's the flight?
I'm already on my way to the airport right now.
I did. I jumped on it and I moved. So I love Toronto, but I hate the cold. So, and it's, and let's be honest, we give it a bad name. It's not colder than Minnesota. It's not colder than Buffalo.
New York,
like it's Chicago.
Boston.
Yeah, it's the same. But anyways, that being said, Charlotte is the next team on the list. How can the greatest player of all time be the worst GM of all time?
I don't know if he's.
I know I'm being a little harsh. I know I'm being harsh. I'm being harsh on him.
He's botched some things. I will say that he has botched some things. But I tell you what, Tone, I think he's got his floor leader in LaMelo Ball. I think he's got his floor leader, and I think he's got the guy that he could build around, extending Terry Rozier. I think that was smart. If Gordon Hayward can stay healthy, I think that they're in the. I don't think that they're in the middle.
The biggest if in the NBA right now.
I don't think that they're in the middle of the Eastern Conference, but I do think that they're right there at making I think they're a playoff team in the making if Gordon Hayward could just hold up. Now, losing Monk, that was big because there's a long ball shooter that you no longer have, but you got Bridges who's solid. You got Terry Rozier who you just extended. You got your floor leader. So I'm looking at this unit, and you got Gordon Hayward who, if he could just stay healthy, I'm looking at this unit, and I think that they could be a playoff team if these guys would, if Gordon Hayward in particular can just stay healthy.
I was reading an article last night, and it said the best offseason move, one of the top 5 best offseason moves this NBA offseason, was the Washington Wizards getting out of Russell Westbrook's contract. And what scares me about Washington is I think that was a good move too. Don't get me wrong, because it wasn't working with him and Beal. But Beal said he is going to shoot more threes and deeper threes this year than ever before. Does that make you nervous about his team mentality, or is it, hey, he's the number 1 scorer on that team, that's what he needs to do?
Well, he's the number 1 scorer on that team, exactly. And what else are they going to do? I think that Washington is going to be like the two teams. I think that they're going to be Orlando. I don't think that they're going to be very good at all. I mean, with Russ, they ended up 10th going into the play-in tournament, and Russ got them to the playoffs. So without Russ, now with that team, who's their floor leader? I mean, they just got Harrell, and they just got Kuz, and they just got in a trade. I can appreciate that, but they got a bunch of B and C guys. Ish Smith is their primary ball handler. I think that Washington is going to be at the bottom. I don't think that they're just going to be at the bottom of the Southeast. I think they're going to be at the bottom of the Atlantic. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the trade deadline, Bradley Beal is traded and they're starting over completely.
I want to say this, and I'm going to put it out there, and I'm nervous to do it, but I'm going to say it.
Do it, Tom. Say it.
I think Kuz is going to be the most improved player, at least in the discussion at the end of next season. Or at the end of this season.
That is a hot take, and you know what? I'm getting on board with that because I watched Kuz his rookie season. I thought he had James Worthy ability. He was 19, almost 19 a game. I thought he was that good, but when LeBron James came aboard, now the things that he was good at, those things had to go to the back burner. And now he had to become a role player in a different sense, where all you're going to do is run the floor and rebound, as opposed to
he has an opportunity to be the number 2 scorer. Mm-hmm. On what's going to be a team that's probably going to need to get out and run and score some points. Mm-hmm. And so people are going to, people always look at stats sometimes over game and wins. He's going to be a guy whose stats are going to jump through the roof. Mm-hmm. And I think he still has the skill set. Mm-hmm. It's, situation and role play a huge determining factor in how you're perceived in this league. And I think him and Beal, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to win a lot of games, but I keep an eye on Kuz this year. I think he's going to surprise some people. We got 2 more teams. We got the Miami Heat. So the Miami Heat made some interesting moves this offseason. The big one, obviously, being the Kyle Lowry addition. Mm-hmm. Interesting that they went from Dragic to Kyle Lowry. Do you see that being a big improvement? And do you see that being, with some of the other stuff, enough to kind of put them into that Bucks, Sixers, Celtics conversation?
I don't know if it's in the Bucks Sixers conversation, but defensively they're going to be a lot better than they were last season with Lowry at the 1, Jimmy Butler and Duncan Robinson, they're going to be in with Bam. They're going to be a much better defensive team. Now, when I look at them offensively, they may not score a lot of points. They may be in the high 80s, low 90s. They may not score a lot of points. However, defensively, that team's going to be really, really good, and that's going to be their staple. Is just stopping teams. That's why I think that they're the best team in that division, because they look to me like the best team defensively more than any of the other teams. They look like the best team defensively. I got Miami. I got them 4th in the Eastern Conference coming up this season.
So you said the best team in that division. So one, Kyle, I love Kyle Lowry. I think the leadership he brings, the stuff that you don't see in stat sheets, I think he does exceptionally well.
Mm-hmm.
I am nervous. Miami, Jimmy, Kyle. Now there's been some injuries, like little nagging kind of injuries. So health is an issue for me. But you said the best in that division. You really high on Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks. Are you sure you want to put Miami
I'm
ahead of Atlanta?
I'm a big Trae Young guy. I love Trae Young because his game. I'm a huge fan of guys whose game translate from the college game to the pro game, because what it suggests to me that you're not a fraud, that you are a pro. So when I look at a guy like Trae Young, who led the country in scoring and he led the country in assists his freshman year at Oklahoma, he comes into the NBA. Last season, he was 25-9. That's second in the league in assists. So I'm a huge Trae Young fan. I think that defensively, when I look at Atlanta, I think that Atlanta has a really good team defensively. And I look at what they do in terms of scoring. I think they got 6 guys. I think they got 6 guys on that group that average in double figures. But I think Miami defensively is going to be better than them, and that's why I give them the edge.
Lock them down a little bit.
Yeah,
Trae Young. It's tough. When Trae Young came out, everyone kind of like, oh, he's too small. He's not going to be able to handle the physicality of the NBA. Mm-hmm. There's the whole Luka Doncic trades and situation, and obviously we've seen how well Luka has played.
Mm-hmm.
One, Trae Young has proven everyone who said that wrong, because he has held up and he has looked really good. Do you think it's very rare that a trade works out for both teams? But I feel like I think Trae Young makes sense in Atlanta, and I feel Doncic makes sense in Dallas. And I actually think it was a good, I think, look, long term, is Doncic going to be better than Trae? Maybe. I think team success is going to be the deciding factor between those two.
Mm-hmm.
But do you agree with me? Do you think if this was actually a trade that made sense? They both make sense where they are. Could you see Doncic in Atlanta? Could you see Trae Young in Dallas? I feel like it's the right situation for both.
Well, when I look at Luka and I look at his game, Luka can be difficult because Luka is one of those guys who you have to adapt your game to him, and he's not one of those guys. Even though he is a distributor, he's not a distributor in the typical sense where he's looking for you. He's a distributor when he gets in trouble. He's a distributor. He's a score first guy. Trae isn't like that. Trae is actually looking for guys, and he's setting guys up, and he looks like he's more efficient in that category in terms of playmaking and in terms of distributing, and he looks like he's less difficult to play with than Luka is. Now, Luka is bigger. I wouldn't give Luka the edge athletically, but Luka is bigger. I think Trae is a better long ball shooter. He stretches the defense a little bit more. I think he may be a little bit of a liability on defense than Luka is, but Luka ain't exactly fleet of foot neither. So that really doesn't sway me. However, I think this did work out. Now, initially, Tone, I will tell you this. When I saw Luka getting traded for Trae, I was thinking, what the hell are they doing? Are you guys serious? Wait a minute, what is this? Only to find out that, Luka is the real deal, but Luka works in Dallas for what they're doing, and Trae, because they built that unit around him.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's the right fit for both.
Yeah, they built that unit around him. So I think this does work for them, no doubt.
So you got Miami in the Southeast. Miami 1, Atlanta 2. I've got the flip. I've got Atlanta 1, Miami 2. And for the simple fact that I agree with you, I think Miami will have the better defensive team, whereas Atlanta will be better offensively. But I also think Atlanta has the younger team. And younger teams tend to go harder in the regular season. I think Miami is a veteran team, right, with Lowry and Butler, who they're going to be like, hey, let's let's not coast. I don't want to use that word, but they're going to be like, let's make sure we're ready for the playoffs because we know that's what matters. And
there may be
so that's why I think just by wins in the regular season,
there may be some management there, Tone. I won't argue that. However,
that's the only reason. That's the only reason why I say Atlanta probably wins more games than Miami. But I think they're both right there at that 4-5. I think it's actually going to be if they played, they might actually play each other in the first round, which would not be good for either one of them because that means only one,
Boston.
right?
Yeah, I got Boston at the 5 spot.
You got Boston, and where do you have Atlanta? 6.
I got Boston at the 5 spot and Atlanta at the 6 spot.
At 6,
which that could get flipped. Tone. Atlanta could be 4, Miami could be 5, and Boston could be 6. So those 3 teams. That's like, that could change at any point. But that's the way I'm going with those 3.
All right, I like it. I think both are legit shots. So we'll get closer next week. Mm-hmm. Next week we're gonna take a flight. We're heading to the West Coast, which makes sense that we're gonna start with the West Coast because we're gonna talk about the Pacific Division. And the Lakers, of course, is going to be a big topic of conversation. Plus, we're looking at the 80s. So where better to be in LA when we're talking about the 80s because we got a team that Magic, a little bit of Kareem, some Worthy, some Michael Cooper. So that's going to be next week and others, of course. So that's next week. Don't forget to check out the NFL edition of Fluent and Chill on Fridays. Until next week.
Take it light, but take it.